Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Um, this is a joint webinar between Intersys and Veeam, and we're going to be talking about building operational resilience with infrastructure, particularly focusing on building resilient, failing over infrastructure, and how to back that up. My name is Mark Kirby. I'm a director of professional services at Intersys, and I'm joined by my colleague.
My name's Yasser. I'm head of infrastructure at Intersys. I've worked here for 11 years, and I also work alongside Mark as well in the professional services division.
Fantastic, yeah. And who is Intersys? So we are a security first managed services provider. We are Microsoft specialists. We have partnerships in modern work, which is the Microsoft 365 environment, data and AI, and of course, Azure infrastructure. We're also long-time Veeam partners. We've been working with Veeam for more than 10 years. We rely on them to back up our critical systems as well as our cloud infrastructure. And we provide strategic support to a number of organizations, specializing in those that work in highly regulated areas, like insurance or finance or professional services. As well as being infrastructure specialists, as I mentioned, we are very cybersecurity focused. And we actually have a software development arm as well, where our key product is something called SCARE, which is supply chain risk management. So we help organizations understand where their weaknesses in their supply chains are and understand what a natural catastrophe or some other sort of disaster, how that would affect them and help them plan out alternative routes. And I'm going to hand over here to my colleagues from Veeam, who are with us in the room.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Florin here. I'm an account manager at Veeam. And for those who might not know about Veeam, we are a global leader in data protection and in data resilience solutions. So we pretty much help businesses keep their data available, secure, recoverable across any environment, whether it's on-prem, in the cloud, a hybrid approach. And just to get a bit over what's happening right now, the market is seeing a bit of a strong shift toward cloud adoption and service-based models. And data resilience is becoming a bit of a critical thing for organizations. I also manage Intersys here at Veeam. We have a long-standing relationship, as Mark just mentioned. I would like to also tell you that you may also have a dedicated account manager as end customers. So if you ever would like to have a dedicated session for, I don't know, just finding out about the products, commercial, or anything like that, just let Intersys know and I can set up a meeting. So yeah.
Great. So my turn real quick. My name is Ilya Sledov. I'm advisor inside system engineer here at Veeam Software. I've been helping our customers building resilient systems for about 7 years, and in short, I'm the techie guy. So I might run a quick demo or two. We'll see how that goes. And over to you, Mark.
Thank you. So a quick overview about what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to start very broad and then focus in on infrastructure. So I'm going to be talking now a little bit about understanding operational resilience, what it is, and how to do that. Then I'm going to pass over to Yasser, who's going to show us how to design a resilient infrastructure. Then we're going to look at what resilience means in the cloud. And how to design an effective backup, and then we'll finish off by going through a demo of one of the Veeam products that shows you how to back up your infrastructure in the cloud. So what is operational resilience? So operational resilience is the ability for an organization to be able to continue delivering its services or making sales and being able to adapt and respond to any disruptions. So no matter what the circumstances, an operationally resilient company will be able to continue servicing its customers. And so operational resilience includes a business continuity plan, and it includes disaster recovery. These are all part of operational resilience, but not operational resilience as a whole. It is a holistic approach that covers people, processes, technology, and even third-party dependencies like your vendors, what you might use for your web hosting or your supply chain, even your IT providers. It's beyond disaster recovery. It's not just about bouncing back after an incident. It's about maintaining operations while an incident is going on. I mean, we've all seen things in recent history, such as the cyber attack against Marks and Spencer. You know, they were unable to operate during that event, which cost them a huge amount. I think they had a negative quarter in Q3, which just really shows how bad it can actually go. Why it matters? It matters because it ensures business continuity, ensures it protects not only your reputation, but also your bottom line. You may, depending on the environment that you work in, have regulatory needs, and definitely you will have customer expectations. Your customers will expect you to always be able to provide the service, and if you don't, that can have very negative results. The sort of disruptions we're talking about, as I mentioned before, cyber attacks, but also natural disasters, supply chain failures, or technology outages. You know, you think about what would happen during an extended power cut. How might that affect your systems, and what do you have in place to rectify that? When we're thinking about operational resilience, we often think of two key terms, which is RTO and RPO. So RTO is your recovery time objective. How long is it going to take you to recover once you press that button? You know, are you able to get your systems back up in 4 hours? Is it 8 hours? Is it a week? You need to know what that is, and that is often going to be built into your SLAs or your agreements with your customers. The other key term is RPO, recovery point objective. How much data are you able to lose? So if, for example, you lost your file system, are you going to get back 4 hours worth of data? Are you going to lose a day's worth of data? Are you able to lose a week's worth of data? And different systems will have different RTOs and RPOs depending on how important they are for your organization. And so we talk about why you have to be operationally resilient. Well, there's been a few things recently, depending on the sectors that you're in, that have come into place over the last couple of years. And so the slide gives a high-level comparison of the key regulatory frameworks that are shaping operational resilience across the UK and the EU. In the UK, the FCA and the PRA require financial firms to identify their important business services and set impact tolerances. So the RTOs and RPOs that I was talking about before, how long they can be before they cause intolerable harm. And they have to test that as well. They have to make sure that they can prove that they're able to recover within 4 hours, for example. And so if you are affected by the FCA or PRA, you are expected to be compliant with that by March this year. So if you haven't, it's something that you really need to look at now, because there are potentially fines if you're found not compliant. Next, if you're doing business in the EU, they have what's called a DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act. We do expect something very similar, if not exactly the same thing, to be implemented in the UK in the next couple of years. It applies to a wide range of financial organizations, and it focuses heavily on ICT risk management, which is what Yas is going to go into a little bit later. It also focuses on incident reporting, testing, and oversight of third-party providers like cloud services. So if you are using someone like Microsoft or AWS, you're probably all right with them. But if you're using a smaller provider, you may want to make sure you do your due diligence to make sure that they are properly resilient. And a lot of organizations, like I said, M&S before, it was actually a third-party provider that provided the into their systems, and that was the reason that they were compromised. Finally, we have NIST 2. Once again, this is in the EU, but we do expect something similar to come into the UK. So this focuses on critical sectors. So energy, transport, health, digital infrastructure, even managed service providers come under it. It focuses a lot on the same things as the other ones do: the ability to recover, the reporting, and cybersecurity risk and their incident response as well. The takeaway here is that although these are all kind of different regulations, they all converge on the same core idea that organizations must be able to continue delivering critical services even if they suffer a disruption. And as I said, the ones that apply to the EU, if you're doing business in the EU, you should be applying to, conforming to them already, but expect something very similar to come in the next couple of years. So what do you need to do? The first thing is you need to make resilience a top business priority. Operational resilience is essential to business survival and customer protection as financial or safety metrics. The mindset must start at the top. Ensure that the board and the C-suite actively oversee resilience plans and progress. It's not just an IT problem, it is an enterprise-wide mandate. You need to know what your breaking points are. You need to understand what services you need to stay running, and analyze how they could break. So, for example, if you're a retail business and your till systems break, what is that going to do for your organization? How long can you tolerate that? And is there a workaround that you have? Maybe even a pen and paper method so you can still continue taking sales even though your tills are down. And you need to do this for all your services. You need to think, if X service was down for Y hours, what happens? And you need to know what to do in that situation. Your staff needs to know what to do. And you need to know every critical service that you're running, because what you don't know can hurt you. And next, you need to build in redundancy and test it. Now, once again, this is what we're going to go over a little bit more later in the webinar, but you need to avoid as many single points of failure as you can. Budget is always a concern, but whenever you can have redundancy, build it in and test it regularly. If you don't test it regularly under realistic conditions, you don't know what's going to happen. My organization runs disaster recovery tests for a lot of our clients, and you bet the first time you run a DR operation, something unforeseen happens. It takes a little bit longer than you thought, or something comes up slightly differently than you thought, and so it's so crucial to test things regularly. Likewise, if you've run a disaster recovery test 2 years ago, when the disaster actually happens, things may have changed in those 2 years, which means that it's a different operation, a different procedure. Next, we need to strengthen cyber defenses and response. There's two kinds of organizations: those that have been breached and those that don't know they've been breached. You essentially need to make sure in this world that you have a plan for what will happen when a cyber attack hits your organization. You need to have tools in place to make sure you can detect it and respond to it. Likewise, you need to make sure that you've covered off the basics. You should have multi-factor authentication for all your staff. You should also have staff training to make them aware of what the threats are and help them be able to spot a phishing email or understand what malware can do and how to avoid it. As I mentioned before, it's something you need to engage your vendors and partners with. Third-party supply chain attacks can be a real entry point, and you need to make sure you've done your due diligence and keep doing your due diligence on your suppliers to make sure that's not an attack vector. There was something that happened maybe a year ago, a supplier called Kaseya that a lot of IT providers use for remote support. Their system was breached, and the threat actors were actually able to get onto all of the computers that the MSP that was using that product could access. Luckily, it was shut down very quickly, but that is just devastating for an organization and the trust that their customers have in them. And finally, you want to foster a resilience culture. Encourage your team to all your teams to flag risks and tell you about any near misses that you have. You want every member of your organization to know what their role is when a crisis hits. You know, who they report to, how to communicate, what the backup procedures are. If you foster resilience as part of that culture, your responses become more instinctive and effective. You know, and then when a real event happens, you've reduced the panic and the chaos, and you're much more likely to come through that unscathed. And now I'm going to hand over to Yasser, who's going to tell us a bit about how to build a resilient infrastructure with as few points of failure as possible.
Thank you, Mark. Businesses usually start with whatever works for them, with high availability. It's not, a lot of people don't start with, when they're setting up something, you know, how to make it highly available. It's usually whatever works for them in that current moment in time. I need to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to deploy X, Y, and Z to make sure that I achieve that. So yeah, businesses usually start with whatever works for them, and it's usually not with something resilient. It's very rare we see that it is. As companies do grow, the systems grow with it in a very organic way. What began as a simple foundation becomes stretched and patched over time. You know, we all know that one system that runs on hopes and dreams, perhaps. It's too important to make resilient. You can't take it down for updates. It's hard to align everyone for it. So when we think about high availability, it's important to ask, how many obstacles do I need to break before I can recover? How many barriers do I have between me and my business failing? You know, if I've got a till system, as Mark mentioned, do I have protections in place to prevent that? Am I still going to be able to take payments when those tills fail? So with that in mind, let's go through what realistic growth looks like in businesses, and how it can run away from you in some cases. So here we've got Bob. Bob's starting up a nice little company. He's gotten really into making handmade toys, so he decides to be his own boss. He gets his laptop, he's got his internet, but he's keeping it smart. You know, he's had USBs and portable hard drives fail with him in the past, so he decides to get a NAS. He's got a NAS because it's got 2 disks in there, and he knows that if one of those disks fail, he's still got some redundancy. So he's removed that single point of failure for him, being his worries around the portable hard drives. He's also got an online store on the cheap that he's set up. You know, he's just gone online. He's maybe put a template together, and maybe he's contracted someone. You never know, but just a nice, cheap, simple website that can allow him to sell his handmade toys. And that's all he really needs right now. It's all about meeting the needs. So Bob here is pretty happy. He's quite chuffed with himself. So moving on now, you know, time has passed. Bob's business is booming. Sales are going well, as all businesses hopefully will. He needs to expand though to meet some of the demands. He's hired some help. So he's got a couple extra laptops here for himself. He's built a nice little home office in his garden. He still has his trusty NAS, his internet, his online store. But he's had some instances where the help has deleted some files that were actually needed, and he's not been able to recover from that. So what does he do to rectify that? He puts some cloud backups in place so that he can have point-in-time restores, rather than just protecting the live data itself as he was doing before over here with disks. He's also been recommended to buy another NAS as well for some live local redundancy. So here now we've got 2 devices replicating to each other, and he's removed a single point of failure with just the one NAS. He's got 2 here. So if not only the disks fail, he's got another NAS here with 2 disks as well that are essentially replicas of each other. And if all of his local system fails, everyone can take their laptops, work home, and restore some data from the cloud as well. or they can just buy a whole new NAS and continue going. That's what Bob's achieved here. Bob's achieved some on-site redundancy and some off-site redundancy for if all hell breaks loose. This here is his holy grail, and this here is what he would really use in his own setup. If something was to fail and he needed some business continuity. So Bob's a pretty happy guy right now. You know, he's got a nice solid setup as a startup. He's got some help. Business is booming. Time moves on now though. The shed is a distant memory. He's hired some IT help now. He's got an office, about a 30-minute commute from home. We've all seen it. He's got some extra help now. So he's got about a team of 8 over here. Expands from his robust setup from a NAS, and he's now got a server set up. He's got a nice server rack. He's got some virtual hosts here. He's got a nice firewall and an internet connection. IT also realized that his online store is starting to hit the seams of the cheap hosting, so they bring that one back in-house as well. They've got the horsepower to do it, so that's what they do. But soon they realize that they need a little bit more systems in place to replace the NASs that they put in. So, you know, they've got a file share, they might have AD, they've got some backups in place and a print server. And this is how most companies in the last 10 to 15 years would look like in any way, shape or form. As time goes on though, you know, they've had a few growing pains. You know, they might have had a power outage in the past, so they end up buying a UPS, a battery backup system, to make sure that they're resilient to power outages. They've also had a couple internet blips here and there where they've lost the internet for about an hour or so. So to rectify that, they've brought in another line, another backup line, and to make sure that not only have they got 2 lines, they've also got 2 firewalls here to make sure that that internet line is not only redundant, but also the thing handling the internet is redundant. This is a nice, solid setup for most people here. His team ends up expanding even further. He's now got a couple more workers here, however many laptops this is, and he also is starting to realize that with the growth, there's got to be some change. You know, maybe they're thinking about moving offices. They've got to think about a whole server rack in this instance. Maybe they're experiencing some growing pains bringing the store back in house. You know, the server, if they're hosting on physical servers, are those servers starting to become out of warranty? You know, when were they last purchased? So if we look in the last 5 years, that may have changed for them. So IT do a lift and shift method. They take everything that was in the host and they move it into the cloud. But with this lift and shift comes some cost in place as well. You have they might have just treated all the systems as one. So in doing so, they've taken exactly as it was on premise and they've placed it in the cloud without really much thought. So the server, the store here might still be hosted on maybe one server. Their file share is probably, if they've done a lift and shift, it's probably on a server rather than something in the cloud, cloud focus, a service or anything like that. They still have their battery backup on premise. They still get their 2 lines. They need that because they're protecting their workforce here to be able to work. When we look at stuff like this, it's important to identify, we're trying to achieve high availability or resilience to failure. It's important to look at the mediums of which people are working or outputting, what the business output is and what people are using to make sure that that output is successful. So everyone's using their laptops in this scenario. So what if a few people, maybe C-suites or finance people, people in charge of the store, for example, in Bob's case, what if their laptop fails? How can they continue working? You want to keep a couple spare in the cupboard there for them, or perhaps the the store, if that was to go online, if that was to go offline, that's a complete outage for them to be able to sell their product. So you might want to stick a load balancer in place with a couple extra web servers, or maybe the store uses a database behind the scenes. You want to make sure that the database itself is highly available, rather than just lifting and shifting into the cloud. You want to make sure that you are leveraging the cloud's power to be robust and highly available. So what have we covered there, really? We've covered removing single points of failure. Bob identified in many instances that if his internet goes down, no one can work. He brought a new internet line in. He brought a new firewall in. The power goes out, the whole server rack goes offline, despite everyone being able to use laptops. So to rectify that, they bought some battery backups. Those are removing single points of failure. A couple other points, you might have network switches, clustering of the hosts, for example, redundant paths to network points. The list goes on. You want to make sure that your failover and replication strategy is robust. How are you testing your redundant site in Azure, for example? If you've got, say, UK South and UK West, have you ever tested to make sure that if your UK South system goes down, your UK West system can stand up the infrastructure? Who knows? You don't want to test that in a live outage. You want to be able to know that it is going down, it is able to recover, because you've tested that in the past. You've got some evidence to show that. And if you have any issues during those testing scenarios, you can rectify them ahead of a potential failure. You want a resilient data layer. What I mean by that is you're using, say, a SAN, or if you've got storage account or in Azure, or S3 storage, anywhere really, you want to make sure that you've got some replication perhaps in place for them, some region redundancy, just to make sure that despite putting your data in the cloud, it doesn't mean that it's completely safe. There could be a failure. There could be something that happens within the data center in the cloud. It's rare, but it does happen. Network path diversity. We touched on that a little bit here with removing single points of failure. But if we trim it down a little bit with internet connections, for example, if you've got two internet connections, that's network path diversity in some cases. You argue that point. You've got redundant links to a switch, or if you've got a massive office complex, you might have two offices geographically separated. Both of them rely on each other's systems. You want to make sure that you've got some path diversity there as well. If one link between the two offices goes down, another one can take over with the same amount of spec. The whole idea here is that if a failure was to occur, instead of the entire thing going down, you've got reduced performance perhaps, but you're still able to operate. And that is better than being completely unable to operate. That is what high availability at its core is. And finally, to make sure that all of these are known when they do happen. Sometimes high availability is so good, you don't even know when something goes down. So how do you make sure that you do? You want to make sure that you've got controls in place, monitoring, you're alerting, disaster recovery runbooks, regular failover testing, automated controls. When a failure was to occur, those are the most important points out of all of this. You want your alerting to be solid. You want monitoring to be good. You want to know when a failure is about to happen, perhaps, or when performance is hitting its max in your disaster recovery scenario. That is key, really. So yeah, with that in mind, I'm going to hand over back to Mark, who's going to talk about Opres in the cloud.
Thank you, Yasser. We certainly learned a lot from Bob's story. So yeah, continuing on from what Yasser said, is a lot of the time organizations get to that point where they've grown out of their on-site systems and they've moved everything into the cloud, whether that be an Azure infrastructure, or just a software as a service like Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. Now, a lot of people are under the assumption that they are able to move stuff to the cloud and then that's it, you're done. Microsoft will take care of all the operational resilience. If you're in Azure, Google or AWS will do it for you, but that is absolutely not the case. To start with, if you haven't optimized your environment for a cloud-focused infrastructure, chances are you're going to be paying a lot of money. We will often do audits for organizations that have, as Yasser said before, a lift and shift to the cloud. And then suddenly their IT costs have doubled. We're able to run, if you run what's called a FinOps exercise, you can often find that you're saving tens of thousands of pounds a year just by optimizing systems to make sure instead of having a server running a website, you can just have a web host built into Azure, which removes a lot of overhead. With a high availability, scalability, and privacy and security, yes, by the platforms themselves are secure, but depending on how you configure them, depends on how resilient and secure they'll be. So the cloud does not equal guaranteed uptime. The platform will have very good uptime, but your services running on it, it's your responsibility to configure them in an effective and resilient way. There's so many ways that you can lose data, even if you are configured correctly. You could have accidental deletion or misconfiguration, deletes things. If you delete a SharePoint site or a team with information in it, it lasts for 30 days in the recycle bin, and then another 30 days in the back-end recycle bin. But after 60 days, that information is gone. If you don't have a backup, you've got no way of restoring that, and it's not Microsoft's responsibility. They will flatly say, no, that information has been deleted. There's nothing we can do. There are often ways that ransomware is still able to affect information, even if it's in the cloud. Your data can be encrypted. If you've got links to your OneDrive or you're using Google Drive, it's possible to still encrypt that information, even though it's based in the cloud. Also, there are reasons why you might want to keep information. So if, for example, a key user leaves, if you delete their account after 60 days, all that information is gone. You may need that for legal reasons or compliance reasons. If, for example, you work for a school, you need to keep the student data for 20 years and to be compliant. So it's your responsibility to make sure that's still there. So even though you've moved to the cloud, all these things that we've been talking about how to maintain operational resilience is still true, and backups are still essential. It's really important that you have a good backup strategy, and as Yas is going to talk about, you want to make sure that you have more than one backup, because what happens if you have a disaster, you go to restore that backup, and then for whatever reason, you find that that backup was either incomplete or it didn't run properly. There's been a lot of situations where we've been called into organizations who are desperate because their key systems have gone down, and when they went to restore, even though the backup was saying that it was completing successfully, it might not have been backing up the right data. Once again, that's why the tests are essential. And so I'm going to hand over to Yasser, who's going to talk a bit more about exactly how you configure a reliable and efficient backup.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I mean, so we've seen how Bob grew his team, his business, tried to implement some barriers on the way. Sometimes it fails to keep up. Sometimes it goes pretty well. You get to an endpoint and things just work. You're only scaling at that point. Thing is that backups are usually where we see the most failure to protect. They are supposedly your last line of defense, your Hail Mary in a crisis. So no one wants to be in a position where you need to restore from backups, but if you have to, you don't want to pray that they're working. You want to guarantee. You want to make sure that you are confident in that fact. And sometimes you need a guarantee for compliance purposes. So with that in mind, what backup strategies can you adopt in your business, in your infrastructure, to make sure that you are reliable and robust in a crisis? So here we've got, don't use old hardware to run backups. A lot of the time I see this where IT teams will buy new hardware, for example. Maybe they've got a couple extra new hosts, and they use their old server as a replica server instead, or as a backup server. The problem with that is that there's a reason why that old hardware has been replaced. You know, it might be out of warranty, it might be aging out, maybe the disks in there are 10 years old, you never know. And if you start using that as a backup system and your live system goes down, and you've only realized in the point of failure that your backup system or your replica system has silently failed in the background because it's so old, you're stuffed. There's not really much you can do in instances like that. You're having to rely on other methods, such as, you know, forensic data recovery, or it's not a position you want to be in. So don't use old hardware for backups. For example, would you keep bald tires in your car and rely on it as a spare tire? Probably not. I wouldn't. Identify your retention period, and if applied, let your client commitments drive your retention length. What I mean by that is, if, for example, you have formal agreements with your client base, you know, you might say, we make sure that we'll be able to recover your data 24 hours or up to a week, or we aim to recover you within 1 hour of downtime. Those could be what shape your retention period. Or it might be that you are an institution that holds financial data, and you're governed by law to store that data for a certain amount of time. If your backups are not protecting that data with the retention period, then you are effectively non-compliant in those instances. So if you ever are wondering what to set your retention period as, let the industry you're in or the commitments you've made guide that fact. It's very simple. You never want to be in a position where you're trying to recover something, or an employee's left 2 months ago and you've realized that your retention period is set to 2 weeks. It's not something you want to be experiencing ever. Admin overhead must be kept to a minimal, point. So what I mean there is your backup system so complicated you have maybe no idea if it's even working, or if there's so many alerts flying out of this backup system that you are getting alert fatigue. You're just like, you know what, it's probably working, it's fine. So you need to make sure that the system is kept simple. Your backup jobs are doing one thing really well, backing up your data. And that is what the admin overhead is trying to achieve there. You want to make sure that IT admins don't have to think about backups, but know with confidence that they're working. Multiple copies of the same data in multiple locations. There's a couple rules to abide by here, answering as well one of the questions in the chat. Realistically, your data must have 3 copies locally, 2 in different mediums of storage, and at least 1 copy offsite. There are multiple ways to achieve that. You can also pick and choose a point out of there, but one of the most important things is that you have a copy offsite. You can protect your data locally as much as possible. Likely in an event of recovery, you are using that local data, but you have fallbacks in place. So primarily you would start here, and then you would move on if, okay, this isn't good, I need to move here. That isn't good, I need to move there. Most people would stop at that stage, and some can. It's a pretty robust thing to do, you know, to have 3 copies locally, 2 in different medium storage, and at least 1 offsite. But you can also expand on that by taking another copy in an isolated storage system or an offline storage system. You know, maybe you've got tape backups, or you might have a lot of S3 storages are coming out with it recently, where they've got another hidden bucket layer that gets replicated in one way. So that's that's what I call, the isolated storage. And then finally, you want to make sure out of all of these backups that you're taking, that there's 0 errors with the data that you are copying across. I've seen it before where everyone's getting green tick successes on backups, and then you go to try and recover and you can't because the backup job itself is failing because the backup data is corrupted. So you want to make sure that you're doing routine testing of restores, sometimes automated testing to remove that admin overhead. You've got technologies out there like Veeam Sure Backup that does it for you. We've saved hours of manual restore tests doing that. So yeah, it's pretty important. Finally, you want tamper-proof backups. You want some tamper-proof backups as well. So tamper-proof backups is really protecting you against one key thing that is happening a lot nowadays, unfortunately, which is ransomware attacks. Ransomware attacks are where your threat actors come in, they compromise your data, and they then hold your data to ransom by encrypting it all and making you pay for a key to decrypt it. In instances like that, most would be out of action without some tamper-proof backups. Tamper-proof backups are a technology designed to prevent even the admin themselves from being able to tamper with the data. You can't delete it, you can't modify it, you can only read it and apply it to the location. And that is the zero trusting of any person until a set date of being able to remove that backup, which is usually defined by your retention period. So a lot of people, a lot of the times when people talk about backups, they talk about these buzzwords, RTOs, RPOs, immutability, encryption. But if you follow these in line, you'll find that you are actually achieving most of those. You're not running old hardware. You've got a solid RTO and RPO in place. Let your clients drive your retention period. You're achieving your recovery time objectives, your recovery point objectives. Admin overhead kept to a minimal. If your backups were failing, you wouldn't have any RTO or RPOs. You wouldn't be able to restore. Multiple copies in multiple locations, the 3-2-1 rule, 3-2-1-1-0 rule, which is actually really inexpensive to achieve nowadays. And tamper-proof backups, your immutability, your air-gapped, your encrypted backups. This is, you can take, there's some core fundamentals here, but as long as you follow this in some way, you'll be safe in that. And solutions like Veeam really do help you achieve this in a very easy way. It doesn't take much setup to be able to do that. I'm going to hand over now to Ilya, who's going to show one of Veeam's new tools called Veeam Data Cloud, which is designed to back up cloud services.
All right. Yeah. So let me share my screen overview, and I've already logged in. So this is the Veeam Data Cloud that we're looking at. As of right now, it's capable of gathering some of the data that you might have, such as your M365 workloads, your Azure workloads, like virtual machines, maybe database and such. Also the Entry ID, which is also a very important piece of the Microsoft Azure platform, especially if you are going or maybe already performed this lift and shift maneuver and running cloud-only approach. So in this case, I strongly suggest you looking on the Entry ID as well. I will focus on the Microsoft 365 today. However, you can always request someone from Veeam or maybe from other partners to show you how the other parts of the platform work. Just a couple of things about this guy. The Veeam Data Cloud Vaults is essentially a backup repository as a service. So pretty much if you're looking for this third copy targets, second media target for your backups, that would be one of the ideal options there as well. The whole data platform as of right now is hosted in Microsoft Azure itself, and we run our own products in the backend. So this Microsoft 365 tenancy, this one, is protected by the Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 in the backend and terminated through the Veeam Data Cloud right here. Yeah, so just a quick overview on how it looks and feels. So this is a very, very nice and shiny dashboard right here, presenting me that I do have some unprotected accounts in my Microsoft 365 tenant that I might need to adjust my backup policy real quick. But well, frankly speaking, that's done on purpose because I need to show you this red part of the circle, right? So yeah, from the configuration standpoint, the way this is done is you go through what we call an onboarding process. We need to establish a connection between Data Cloud and your Microsoft 365 bubble. We do that by registering Microsoft Azure Entra ID application registration. There are two ways. You can either do that yourself, that would be the hard way. So you do the app registration, you assign all the permissions, etc., then share the ID and the secret with the Data Cloud, and we're good to go. Or you can just use the simple way where you trust us just one time, and we will create it here using Azure command line interface upon your approval, pretty much. So yeah. What else? I do have this Microsoft Backup Storage enabled. This is something like an extra layer of protection that you can achieve within the Veeam Data Cloud. That works as some kind of a snapshot on your source data. So in this case, data does not leave the Microsoft 365 bubble itself. It stays there. The upside is if that would be a need for the restore, that would be a super rapid process, like we're talking about terabytes an hour from the speed perspective. The downside is you cannot restore granularly from those, snaps, because it's not like real backup. What else from the Data Cloud real quick? Defaults will let you in from any points on the map. However, if you need to outline that to your campus network, right, just tell us so, and then we will only let you in from the subnet that you specify right there. Also defaults, we are super happy to send you some email or Teams channel notifications towards your environment, right? However, if there is a need for a bit of a tighter grip on the solution, we can also organize a syslog feed down to your environment so that you can receive that event-based communication and, I don't know, integrate that with your ESDR or CM tool or whatever is listening to the syslog in general within your organization, if any, of course. And again, that is there for you. What else you probably would expect, like a repository tab right here or some kind of a storage tab. We keep that hidden by default. You set it when you do the onboarding, and then we keep it hidden to avoid any kind of false positive authentication. Someone came in, changed your retention, and we would let it because we had a valid account logging into the system. Yeah, so why should we put any attention to that? And then suddenly next day you come in to restore something and there is no data because the retention was set to 0. To avoid that, we hid it. And if you need to make a change there, just shoot an email to our service desk. They will enable that, and you make a change and we hid it again. So yeah, from the policy standpoint, right, let me create a new one real quick. So there are two types, right? There is that Microsoft backup approach, as I was saying, a bit of an extra layer of protection. This is super easy to configure. You're just saying, all right, I want to protect, say, Outlook, right, as a service. And then it did say that I have the policy there already, but anyways. And then you can pick actually what mailbox has got will be covered by that policy over there, and that's it. And then Microsoft does that, and that is stored within the M365 bubble in there. If you're actually looking to get, like I would say, a true backup approach, in this case, you would need to have this flex policy or Veeam backup policy, how we call it. And in this case, you would need to name it for sure. I will put some, random number letters here, right? It gives me an indication that my data will go to a central US. That's the region that I selected when I was doing my onboarding, right? And that will be reset according to my settings, which are keep forever as far as I remember. And yeah, those backups are immutable through entire retention duration over there. If you would have more than one repository point, you will have a drop-down menu here instead, and then you will be able to select where the data goes. Yeah. So the policy can be as easy as let's grab everything, right? And everything would be Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, Exchange, Line Archives as well. Or you can set something granular saying, hey, you know, I do want my Exchange Online to be protected right here, but I don't really want a particular group of users to be present in that backup. Let's say this late time guys, whatever. Yeah, so we can exclude that, and that will be the policy. Default, we run it once a day. However, if you need to have it more granular way, sure, just let us know. We will adjust the policy according to your exact needs. So that will conclude the backups. Of course, I do have some history coming down there, right, on how it works and so on, right? And if I will have that flex, then that will also represent the sessions down there. So just to show you how restore will work, and it's actually nice and easy. What I'm doing, I'm pretty much opening the restore session for Microsoft Exchange right there, or Outlook for convenience. And I'm looking at my latest restore point up here. I can go back points in time if I would need to, and it basically presents me the tree of data rates, and I can navigate through that and do some restores. I'm actually looking for someone named Jon Snow here, right? We know his watch is over and everything, but if I would try to restore this gentleman here, it actually gives me a couple of options, right? And that's only because I'm on the mailbox level. This particular guy is protected by both Microsoft and Veeam policy. That's why I can pick what sort of restore I'm running here, right? So if I will go to Microsoft restore or Express restore, it indicates me that I actually have something at it's about 10 minutes ago or so, or it's at 2 minutes ago actually. So, and I can roll it back. Keep in mind, if I will do original, it will replace all the data rates, and what I can do is probably create a new folder under Jon Snow that will contain his data by 10 minutes ago, right? That will be super fast, but there is no granularity, and it's all or nothing. So I'm either doing that or not doing that. However, if I would go with a flex restore, a bunch of different options. So first of all, I can say, you know, this data actually goes to a different mailbox. So I don't want to restore that back to Mr. Snow. Or even if I do, I might say, you know, I don't need everything. I just want missing items. That's it. Or I can even just flat export that data to a PST archive in that case. One more thing, I am allowed to do all those things just because from the role-based access control standpoint, I am the full administrator right here. But depending on my role, I might not have that variety of restore options. That depends on how I configure the solution, because not always you would like to have, you know, full access to everything granted to a specific operator of the web portal, right? Yeah, long story short, if I will drop down to like a tree of data, so I will see all the folders that Mr. Snow has already, and you know, see there are a lot of stuff in here. Yeah, just in case all the fancy Exchange stories like in place hold archives, litigation hold items, all of that is supported, will be present in the tree. Yeah, so but when I'm down to like I'm even able to see that tree because this guy is covered by the flex policy or normal backup policy, and on any level I will have pretty much same restore options to have it flat exported or to be restored back to original location or somewhere else within the same M36510 and so on. Yeah, the very same would be done for the other services as well. And one more thing to indicate, so for instance, if I will be enjoying the body of an email, and technically I can do that again if my role is enough to be able to observe the email content right there. We will not really go over it because the only reason I'm showing that to you is we do have a full audit trail. That I mean, everything that happens within the platform gets logged. We store that for the entire subscription duration, right? So up until you use the service, we got that log. So if you've been using that for 10 years, you want to go 10 years ago with those logs, sure, let's just do that. And what happened is, so first thing, a couple of things to bring your attention to. So first of all, this is me, veeam.com. I opened the restore session for the Exchange data, and that's already in the log. And what I also did, I enjoyed looking at Mr. Snow's email in the inbox folder. And if I will go details, that actually gives me the item ID here as well. So it means that I know exactly what sort of item was touched and so on. So full audit trail is there. And back to restores, if you don't really know what you're looking for, right, probably don't know where the data is located and so on. So feel free to use the thorough search here. Say, hey, you know, I'm looking for the OneDrive item that is exactly, I don't know, a PDF file. And I do know that it actually was named something around I don't know, 1 to 3 something, right? So, or 2 1 to 3, whatever. So I just build a list of criteria that I'm using for search. I'm starting the search, and once the search will be completed, I will have the results down here and also up here under the notifications tab as well. What I can do, I can actually restore directly from the search results. So I don't need to reopen anything here. I just say, hey, okay, I will restore that particular item, and then boom, here we go. Again, back to cloud, back home, depends on the way you like to run the restore. Last but not least, there are, of course, a bunch of reports. Some of them, I would say, a bit of a compliance story, like, okay, that specific backup happened on that specific timing. And some of them are, again, kind of audit trail, like restore activity. So whatever was restored over a certain period of time, again, you don't need to bother each time and go and, do that on demand. You can just schedule that and get it to an email or whatnot. Yeah. So that's a quick flyover over the Veeam Data Cloud for Microsoft 365. And yeah, by the way, all questions are welcome in the chat or the Q&A session. And if you need something more detailed, feel free to reach out to the guys, and they will pull us in, and we will organize a thorough discussion on the particular piece of the data cloud and so on. And that is it for the demo. So Mark, I think over to you.
Thank you very much, Ilya. So it's good to see how robust that system is, and we particularly like the audit trail. But that's everything for today. So thank you all for your time and for attending. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and we can answer them now or put them in the chat. Otherwise, if you can't think of anything yet, but it comes up later, please, feel free to send us an email. Thank you for your applause. And yeah, we appreciate you coming. Thanks, everyone.